Hello and welcome to Next 2.0 on WQLN PBS NPR. Next is produced by the Public Voice Media. I am your host, Marcus Atkinson. If you want to know more about the show, you can go to Facebook and you can like the page, follow us, and share with your family and friends. You can also follow us on Instagram at Next 2.0 Erie. There you can keep up with upcoming show promos, events, and clips about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's address the elephant in the room. I sound terrible. I'm sniffly. I'm sneezy. You can probably hear that come through in the microphone. I apologize if it's a little more difficult to pay attention to me. I appreciate you tuning in just the same. Pennsylvania is politically becoming one of the most valuable destinations. Of course, we're a battleground state. You are seeing them visit places like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. We are on the map in terms of you got to get there if you want to win. And Erie County is no different, all right? And so we've had visits from J.D. Vance, which was a week ago from when I'm recording this, and actually yesterday from when I'm recording this. Governor Tim Walz has come to Erie so that he can make a case for Kamala Harris. J.D. Vance is here to make a case for Donald J. Trump. And I want to play a couple of brief clips from both of those visits so that you can get a feel for, what all they talked about in Erie and how Erie responded to that. I want to read some information that I compiled in terms of why the Erie area, Pennsylvania especially, is so valuable to these candidates. And I've compiled information from U.S. News, CNN, USA Today, and kind of an amalgamation of information. And so I'll be reading some of it and commenting off and on before I get to the clips because I want you to have an understanding. We're going to set this up because in the near future, we're going to do something on Project 2025. I know that people are trying to dismiss it. That needs to be unpacked, and we plan on doing that. And so this, feels like another introduction to kind of prime the pump for that show. But gathering all that information, let me read you this. It says the state's 19 electoral votes, that being the state of Pennsylvania, actually ties with Illinois for the fifth most among all states. And with 10 of the past 12 presidential election winners having won Pennsylvania, it is a bellwether state. And as Pennsylvania goes, for the most part, so goes the election, and the numbers bear that out. Think about this. When Biden was in office, before he exited the race, he visited the state several times just this year, including making a trek to his hometown of Scranton, which is the largest city in 2024 battleground Lackawanna County. Not long after Kamala Harris became the Democratic Party's new standard bearer, she visited Philly, that being Philadelphia, on August 6th for a rally where she introduced Governor Walz, who again just came to visit us, in the hopes that he would appeal to working class voters in the blue wall swing states. And I got to say, she appears to have really hit a home run in that running mate. In the state of Pennsylvania, a lot of people, it's kind of mixed emotions. On the one hand, you wanted to see Josh Shapiro chosen because he's a hometown guy. He's really, really popular in the state of Pennsylvania. On the flip side, you didn't want to lose him. When Walz was chosen, people were kind of surprised. Josh Shapiro is very charismatic. This guy is an apex politician. He's just good at what he does. The more I've gotten to know Tim Walz, the more I see and I get it. Like, okay, this is as everyday as they get, as everyday as they come, right? From the coach to the teacher, to the way he talks, to the way he acts, his family connection, him as a hunter, all of these different things. And so I think she did well there. It says Harris also reportedly considered Josh Shapiro again, and she introduced a new Democratic ticket at that Philadelphia rally. And if you remember, Josh Shapiro was at that rally, and he was very gracious about it, very supportive of everything that she was doing. Meanwhile, Trump visited Harrisburg in February so that he can speak at a National Rifle Association event, the dreaded NRA, or the much contested, I'll say it like that, NRA, where he told members that no one will lay a finger on your firearms if he wins in the fall. Bookmark there. That is becoming an issue. And as I record this, we had yet another school shooting in Winder, Georgia, and we'll touch on that because Governor Walz actually makes reference to that in one of his speeches. The gun issue is one that someone is going to have to come up with some reasonable resolution for, because it just feels like, for lack of a better term, and no pun intended, the wild, wild west. It has become too commonplace for school shootings and things along those lines to happen. And I think America's really wringing their hands over that whole thing. But it goes back to the article saying that Trump also claimed that if he doesn't return to the White House, they're going to change the name of Pennsylvania, seemingly pointing to name changes of sites and buildings honoring historical figures, which, to be fair, is a page out of the Trump playbook in terms of wanting to stir up fear and things along those lines. Although many accuse Kamala Harris of the same thing and her camp of the same thing. If Donald Trump gets back in, he's an existential threat, and some people view that as fear-mongering as well, just trying to keep it level. Days before the start of his final criminal trial in April, the former president held a rally in Schnecksville, Pennsylvania, where he criticized the judge presiding over the trial and portrayed Democrats as trying to keep him from another term in the White House. Trump was later found guilty, of course, of these 34 felony counts. But the point is, Pennsylvania is coveted, highly coveted by these political candidates, and they get everything that these articles are going on to say, that it is a bellwether state, that you do need to win Pennsylvania if you plan on getting into the White House. And so the GOTV efforts, the get out to vote efforts in the state of Pennsylvania are paramount right now. And there are more than a few groups for the Dems and for the Republicans that are out there trying to stir up votes for their candidates. It talked about that bellwether thing. Let's take a look at some of these past elections and get a feel for it. In 2020, Joe Biden won the state of Pennsylvania, and he went on to win the White House. 2016, Donald Trump won the state of Pennsylvania. He goes on to the White House. 2012, Barack Obama, same situation. 2008, again, Barack Obama, same situation. The only one in recent memory that has won Pennsylvania and did not move on to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue was John Kerry in 2004, who won the state of Pennsylvania with a margin of victory of 50.9% versus George W.'s 48.4%. But as we all know, W went ahead and took the White House at that time. And so let's start with just a few key reminders before we play the clips of these candidates of what the key voter groups in Pennsylvania look like. Nearly 3/4, that being 74.5% of PA's population, is non-Hispanic, white, with the Black or African American population at 12.2% and Hispanic population at 8.6%. Accounting for the next largest groups by race and ethnicity, Pennsylvania also has an older population with 19.6% of people at least 65 years old, to exceed the national mark of 17.3%. That's a significant group here. The state lost one electoral vote as well as a congressional seat after the 2020 census and saw its population decline by about 10,400 people in 2023. And so there's an electoral vote lost because of that slight population decline, but Pennsylvania is still one of the strongest in the union in terms of its ability to turn an election from negative to positive for any particular candidate. And so let me go to the clips from both of these campaigning candidates. The first one I want to do is J.D. Vance. And there's two clips that I'll play. One was a question from Erie News Now, a local news station, and the next question is from WJET. Why is that significant? Because I know that the Trump-Vance campaign hangs their hat on the fact that they actually take questions from the media. It's something that they've been knocking Kamala Harris and her campaign on. She's done her interview with CNN. Some people said it was softball and not necessarily a hard-hitting interview. People were waiting to see if she would come across as presidential. I think she did, and I think for all intents and purposes, America agreed, whether you like her or not. She came across as very presidential and seemed to be more of a credible candidate than some people believed leading into it. But there still hasn't really been this Q&A with the media. And so the two clips that I'll play represents that, because again, Vance and Trump are very quick to point out, we take questions, the other side doesn't. So let's go with the first question and J.D. Vance's response.
Good evening, Senator. Thanks for coming to Erie County, Pennsylvania. Philip Ward from Erie News Now. Senator,
Phil's one of the good guys, right?
Senator, how do you relate to Erie County voters, and what does a potential Trump-Vance administration mean for us locally?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Driving through Erie, Pennsylvania, I could not help but think how much this reminds me of my hometown in Middletown, Ohio, right? And this, of course, is a town with a proud manufacturing and proud steel-making tradition. By the way, why don't we keep American steel companies owned by America, right? But a proud manufacturing tradition, and all I could think driving through Erie is, this is a beautiful place, but it has been left behind by a lot of stupid policies from people like Kamala Harris. And let's be honest, it's not just Kamala Harris. There was a consensus in this country for 30 years that we didn't need to make our own stuff. And so now everything, from a lot of the steel that we rely on to the drugs that we put in the bodies of our children, from ibuprofen to antibiotics, it's made by our adversaries instead of made by American workers. Wasn't that stupid? Yes. And the one person in politics in my lifetime who said, no more of this, we want to rely on Pennsylvania workers, was Donald J. Trump. And over 4 years of his leadership, we had a bigger boom for American manufacturing and American energy than we've seen. That benefits the people of Erie, Pennsylvania. We had rising take-home pay and rising wages under the leadership of Donald Trump, and we had a world that was at relative peace and calm. And now we've got a world at war in seemingly every continent. Who's going to fight those wars? I guarantee you, it's not going to be Kamala Harris's family. It's going to be the people right here from Erie, Pennsylvania. So we want peace, right? Peace and stability. But even bigger than that, we want an economy that employs good Pennsylvania workers to make things for people all over this country. And we want truckers to be empowered instead of throttled and have their industry destroyed. It's very simple. And if we do that, we're going to make the lives of every single people in this room, every single person in this room, and all across the state of Pennsylvania better. And the final point that I make is, look, Rome wasn't built in a day, and Rome wasn't burned down in a day. We had so much success for just 4 years of Donald Trump's leadership. I think we're going to have a hell of a lot more with 4 more years of Donald J. Trump. Sir.
Hello, Senator. Thank you for coming to Erie today. I'm Tyler Gallagher. I'm with Jet 24 News here. Erie's kind of had a declining economy and population. How is the Trump administration going to directly help the hardworking people of Erie bring people back here and, create more jobs?
It's pretty simple, actually. But unfortunately, we have a leadership that's completely broken. I mean, the first thing that you have to do, if you want to help the people of Erie, Pennsylvania, is you have got to unleash American energy. It'll make manufacturing cheaper. It'll make trucking cheaper. It'll help everybody. Look at it. It's not just our businesses. I remember growing up in Middletown, Ohio, and I grew up in a poor family, and I was raised by my grandmother. I remember the nights when it was really cold in the dead of winter, and money was a little tight, and we decided, well, we don't have enough to turn on the heater tonight. We're going to have to sit in front of a space heater, or maybe just throw a bunch of blankets on. And that's what we're going to do. I happen to believe that if you work hard and play by the rules, this is the richest country in the world. You ought to be able to turn on the heater for your children. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris's policies mean less energy, less money in people's pockets, and a lot of people freezing on a cold winter night. I think that's a disgrace in the richest country in the world. We can do so much better with better leadership. The second thing you got to do is, look, I talked about Chinese slave labor earlier. One of the reasons why this community has been left behind by our leaders is we decided we were going to let companies make things using Chinese slave labor. And I happen to think we shouldn't expect Americans to compete with a bunch of Chinese slave laborers. We ought to expect American companies to hire American and build in the United States of America. And if you do more of that, you're going to bring more jobs to Erie, Pennsylvania. You're going to build the economic foundation of this place. You're going to have higher tax revenues to go into the schools and the public services. You build more things in America, and it lifts up the entire community of Erie, Pennsylvania, and that's what Donald Trump and I are going to fight for. And then the final thing is, look, the number one issue when I go to places like Erie, Pennsylvania is inflation. The number two issue is, why did Kamala Harris open up the southern border and let these cartels bring in the poison that's killing our families? It's ridiculous. We've got to stop doing this craziness. She said on day one she wanted to open up the border. She said on day one she wanted to suspend deportations. She said on day one she was going to end Donald Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. Donald Trump has a different message for illegal immigrants. pack your bags, because in 6 months you're going home. And when we do that, you're going to have fewer people dying of drug overdoses. You're going to have fewer people who are suffering because you've got drug cartels operating freely in their communities. You've just got to do it. You've got to close that border. It's good for public safety and a whole host of other things, too.
Vice presidential running mate to Donald J. Trump, J.D. Vance, making a case for a second Trump term here in Erie, Pennsylvania. Now let's go to a couple of clips from Governor Tim Walz as he outlines why he believes America should put Kamala Harris into the White House. Take a listen.
This guy was in power. First thing he did, he told us this. Remember 9 years ago? Oh, healthcare be simple. I got a plan on the first day. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. The first day plan was to repeal the Affordable Care Act, taking away our protections. And I'll give him this. The second thing he did say he was going to do this. He was very clear about it. He promised he would do it, and he kept his word. He said, with a bunch of his rich friends, he goes, you're super rich, these folks down in Mar-a-Lago, and I'm going to cut your taxes. He did that. He did that. Then the third thing he did, he wasn't quite so honest about because he told us he wasn't going to do it. He installed 3 Supreme Court justices who took away our right to control our own bodies. He did all that before he tried to violently overthrow our democratic government, too, by the way. In an election that he got his butt whipped fair and square and lost. It's that simple. It's that simple. Look, I'm not telling Pennsylvanians anything you don't already know. Under Donald Trump, you lost 275,000 jobs during the Trump years. Under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, with Josh Shapiro, you gained back 550,000 in the last 4 years. With the leadership of your elected officials here, you've got some of the lowest unemployment in history here in Erie. So you know, we can't afford 4 more years of this guy. What I will say is good about this one is, he's been very clear about this. He's promised to pick up right where he left off the last time. But I will say this, he's learned a little something, and it's going to be much, much worse if he gets the opportunity. What's really good is, we don't have to guess what he's going to do, because they wrote it out in a 900-page manual called Project 2025. So look, I keep talking about this. I hear folks say, tell us what you're going to do. All right, we'll continue to tell you what we're going to do. To all of those young folks, to everybody out there, get your phone out, record this one. This is the one you're going to send to those undecided friends. I don't know, I'm not just sure. I don't know, I really am thinking about that we need to give a tax break to billionaires. And I keep thinking about this. They send people out. They send people out to bars in the swing states. Yeah, somebody's sitting at the bar in Pittsburgh tonight, and they're sitting around there saying, you know what we really need to do in this country? We need to ban George Orwell books. That's what we need to do. No, that's not what they're saying. They're saying we need to pay people a fair wage. We need to make sure that health care is accessible. We need to make sure we're tackling things like climate change. So here's what Kamala Harris is going to do. She is going to give a tax cut, but not to the billionaires, to the middle class, to the middle class. If you're looking to buy that home, she's going to make it more affordable to get in that home. And if you're getting squeezed by prescription drugs, you don't have to guess because she's already done it. We're going to tackle big pharma and reduce the cost of those drugs. And if you're going to start that small business, you're going to get help on the front end and cut the red tape to give you a chance to achieve the dream you want to achieve. And here's what I'm going to say. If you're in a union or if you're not in a union, we're going to make it easier to get in one of those and collectively bargain for better wages. And amen. And if you're dependent on Social Security or Medicare or covered by the Affordable Care Act, we're going to make sure it's safe and sound. We're not interested in cutting taxes for the wealthy and then raising the Social Security retirement age. We're not interested in cutting taxes for the wealthy and undermining Medicare. We're not interested in listening to them tell us, I got a good plan on day one, it'd be easy to fix Medicare. Oh, for God's sakes, it's not going to be, and you know it. All right. No matter who you are or where you live, Kamala Harris is there to make sure you make the decisions in your life that's right for your life, for the choices that you and your family make.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Governor Tim Walz making his case for a Harris administration, wanting you to vote for her in November. I just wanted to take time out to let you hear snippets from the candidates themselves or the vice presidential running mates themselves as they visit here in Erie, Pennsylvania, and to underscore just how valuable Pennsylvania is to the process as we continue to cover this very exciting election cycle. But I want to end you on some words from Governor Tim Walz about gun violence. It sounds cliche, but here at Next 2.0, our thoughts and prayers are genuinely with the families of those students and teachers that were slain in Winder, Georgia. This is happening far too often, and it doesn't matter how you vote or who you vote for. This is certainly something we need to wrap our brains around and do something about in some way, shape, or fashion, because it is just becoming too normalized to have children and administrators gunned down in what was known in the past as arguably the safest place in America for our children, that being an educational institution. And that is no longer the case. Many of these gunmen are looking at these education institutions, these schools, as soft targets, and to take out the most innocent of us, even oftentimes at the hands of the most innocent of us, is something as a society we just can't stand for. And so I want to end this on the words from Governor Tim Walz as he speaks to the Erie crowd. And we all need to ponder this, again, devoid of how you vote. Take a listen.
And yeah, we believe in the freedom to send our kids to school without being shot dead in the hall. The news cycle moves on within a day. What we saw yesterday down in Georgia. Kids going to school the first week of school, excited. Now we have 4 dead. So our hearts go out to the 2 students and the 2 teachers who were killed. Their families will be in mourning. There's many injured in Winder, and that community will never be the same. I said this, and all of you here, both as a teacher and as a student and as a dad, I loved back to school season. Time of hope, excitement. Now for those kids, it'll always be a time of sheer terror, and that'll be a memory that they'll hold forever. And it's a reminder to the rest of the country, we've got work to do, and I, for one, am sick and tired of hearing about thoughts and prayers rather than actually doing something about it. And I say this to all of you. I know guns. I'm a veteran. I'm a hunter. But we can't let them make this just about the Second Amendment. I defend the Second Amendment. But our first responsibility is to keep our kids safe. Yesterday, Vice President Harris said it doesn't have to be this way. And I can tell all of you, as someone who's owned guns my whole life and hunted, I can tell you I can remember it with such clarity. I sat in my office in D.C. when I was a member of Congress, and it was shortly after the Sandy Hook massacre. And I sat in there with all those parents. And at that point in time, I was an NRA guy. Many of us grew up with that they were gun safety. And I was the only one who took the meeting with them. They tried to get meetings with people who wanted to do this. And to sit in there and listen to these parents, I think about it today. My son, this week, started his senior year of high school. Thank you. Thank you. And it's bittersweet for me because those killed at Sandy Hook would have been entering their senior year too at the same time. And those parents now are without those. So look, we've got something to vote for, not just against. We've got a better future, a better way forward, a way that makes sure that we're not just after the fact spending a day or so talking about this and not doing anything about it. There's things we can do. Other countries don't have to live like this. Other countries have figured this out.
Next 2.0 streams on Fridays on all major podcast platforms and the fourth Sunday of the month at 4 p.m. on WQLN PBS NPR, which is 91.3 FM. If you want to leave a message, comment, or suggestion for the show, call the Next 2.0 hotline at 814-240-8816. We look forward to hearing from you. I'm Marcus Atkinson. Join us next time so that you can hear about what's next for our communities and our democracy. And never forget that it is your right and responsibility to stay engaged with the political process. Your voice is your vote.